anytime you're developing a relationship with someone, it always starts with like bringing value. It's not about what can I get. If you're pitching somebody your deal like on the first conversation, you probably 9 times out of 10 aren't going to close that deal. If you show up with value to that person or just trying to get a better understanding of who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, chances of you actually delivering something that's spot on for what they're looking for is going to be way higher after that first conversation.
I was going to ask, why do you think you were able to make it to where you're at now? But you found the least amount of friction as you move down you drop a marble into the top and it's going to find the easiest way to the bottom. And I'm not saying you picked the easy way. You picked the most efficient and effective way to ride the bike and to get to a place where you could do it professionally. You just signed another professional contract as a mountain bike athlete that enables you to do Super Rider and all of your other projects that's how you put food on the table, or one of the ways you put food on the table. What is that like, being so far removed from high school athletics, collegiate athletics? I'm not calling you old. I think we're both the same age, but as the years go on, like you're still doing what you love. How is that the case?
I think that I took a huge break in between to go sharpen up all my skills behind the scenes, working for Red Bull as an athlete manager and a field marketing manager, and all the roles that I held at Red Bull gave me a lot of information to become extremely dangerous when it came time to negotiate contracts or to develop output that I knew would be valuable to a brand.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation at TrailCon last week where I was talking to somebody who had just recently started working at a brand. They'd been an athlete for a long time, and they got a chance to really see how it works on the other side. And it was this huge awakening of like, oh, that's how you ask for that, or that's right. What you say. And that was like a big part of my conversations with Dylan over the years, where he had the right idea, but I'd be like, I know what you want, but you should ask for it like this.
Yeah.
Or, little piece of advice that maybe sounded crazy in the moment, but even up until recently, I was like, hey, just send him an invoice and see what happens, Maybe not the best advice ever, but like, I think it actually did work. There's all these little things that you learn. And so now that I have a little bit of time and momentum on the Super Rider side of things, I can go in and sit down across from a CMO and say like, hey, talk to me about the stuff that you're working on. What are your KPIs for the year? What do the OKRs look like here? And how do I fit into those? What other athlete even cares enough to sit down across from a CMO and ask those kind of questions? I feel like the internal conversations, when you're privy to that, you can actually have way better conversations when it comes time to sponsorship. And I think understanding those conversations and understanding how to build and plan and have the right tools to, kind of guide those conversations is probably what's made me still be able to do what I'm doing today.
Yeah, I think it's less about like who wants to do it and more about who knows to do it, right? I feel quite similarly, having been on the brand side for 11 years and being in those conversations where like I know what my team is looking for. I know what the KPIs are. I know what success looks like. And then it's structuring a conversation with an athlete or an ambassador or a partner to pull out those tactics or outline those tactics that lead us to the end zone. After we wrap up today, I'm having a meeting with Noah Drawdy, who is a professional athlete and extremely fast marathoner, who's now on the brand side. I believe he's working with Omius, the company that puts the cold thing on your. I'll have to get a better explanation from Noah, but like it's what Kipchoge wore that cools himself while performing. And so he's basically a brand manager and speaking to the former version of himself, the athlete. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say, having attempted to negotiate with Salomon and Saucony and these brands over the years, and now having this type of experience. And it's the same conversation that I've had with Dylan and with others around, if you want to build a successful partnership, you have to communicate. There's no other way. You can't just, in 2010, you could march into a room and say, I'm a great athlete, you should partner with me. And that would work. Today, 2025, it doesn't work. You have to be interesting. You have to help facilitate the delivery of whatever they're looking for in that discussion.
It's interesting now that there are so many different ways to show up as a brand and with brands. And I think one of the things that you probably have seen is this idea of congruency. Like, is the partner congruent to the brand in terms of goals, in terms of message and everything? And I think one of the biggest struggles right now that I'm personally feeling is finding that congruency. I was joking with Steve Holmberg and Matt Sharkey about this the other day, where I feel like sometimes I'm playing a game of Go Fish, where I'm like, I have an Instagram following over 100,000. No, okay. I have a YouTube over 130,000. No, okay. I have a newsletter. I have a podcast that's B2B. No, okay. I'm also posting on Chinese social media. Oh, that's the one. Okay, let's go with that one. So like you're trying to find this level of congruency, which is great if you have more than one thing that you offer up. But also because, all these brands have all these different things they're trying to do and different KPIs, finding that first, layer in that you could be congruent on can sometimes be a little bit trickier. Whereas in the past, it was like, I race. Like, what more do you want from me?
Yeah,
and like
perform.
Now there's more stuff, even in the, UGC world of, awareness conversion or consideration conversion, like, well, which one of these are you looking for? Whereas in the past, we didn't have any of that stuff. It was just like, they're a great athlete. Let's just go sign them and put our helmet on them,
The awareness, consideration, conversion piece is, I probably said it on your podcast when we chatted, episode 45, about brand versus performance marketing. Like, you can have 2 of 3 sometimes. You definitely can have 1 of 3, and you probably can't have 3 of 3.
Yeah.
And about 50% of the time, the brand doesn't know which one they're looking for, which is a red flag. If the brand knows which one they're looking for and they can stay committed to that, like, many times brands will know what they're looking for, but they don't stay committed to that one thing. They're like, oh yeah, you're not converting, so this isn't working. Like, I did a partnership with a brand that wanted awareness and some consideration, and ultimately the partnership didn't renew because it didn't convert. And I was like, we didn't agree on that. We talked about, you're a new brand and you want to get into the space and you want to leverage me and my use of the product that I love. Okay, well, I'm not going to focus on conversion. And then, 3 months later, it's like, okay, I thought we weren't obsessed with conversion. So back to the Go Fish analogy, I'm curious to know from you, from your experience, how do you tease that out? And how do you, particularly knowing that different people within a brand are looking for different things, right? You have a growth marketer, you have a brand marketer, you have somebody who's focused on retention. And if you speak to a different person, they're all going to have different KPIs or things that they're looking to achieve, and budgets set aside against those things. And you're not going to satisfy everyone, right? If you're driving new customers, that's not going to lead to success for the retention manager immediately. Maybe in 6 months it will, but that's a completely different conversation. And the partnership might have lapsed by then.
That's true. And I mean, I've been in so many scenarios, both from the athlete side as well as internally at brands where, they're not even having that conversation. They're just like, what's the ROI on athletes? And you're like, oh, you guys are missing it.
Yeah.
They're not even advanced enough to talk about awareness or on consideration or conversion. I think all you can really do is just develop relationships. And I think in my world, I'm trying to develop long-term relationships. And so I'm putting in more time at the upfront. I probably could spin around some faster, shorter term wins if I really wanted to. I think you have to make that decision at a certain point of like, is this a brand that I would like to work with for, a year to 4 years?
For the long run.
Yeah. Oh, nice. There we go. And if so, then it's really more about developing the relationship with your first contact and really getting to know them and understanding, having conversations about what matters to them and then trying to offer it up. Now, where I think that conversation is teed up correctly is when you have a better sense of like what your value proposition is as an athlete specifically. So for example, with Super Rider, a lot of my content is just, I'm teaching beginner and intermediate riders how to have control and confidence on a bike. And so it doesn't make sense for me to go to a bike brand that's selling $12,000. Yeah. Like that. Okay. That's not the right fit for beginner, intermediate riders. I should go to a brand that's like really all about having fun, getting you on a really high quality bike that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And that's where, in my case, Marin made a ton of sense. So it made sense for me to go to them and be like, hey, I'm speaking to the same people you are. And I'd love to get a chance to have a chat with you and get to know you guys and get a better sense of like how you're speaking to those people. And maybe we can just compare notes. And I think like anytime you're developing a relationship with someone, it always starts with like bringing value, right? It's not about what can I get. If you're pitching somebody your deal like on the first conversation, you've probably 9 times out of 10 aren't going to close that deal. If you show up with value to that person or just trying to get a better understanding of who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, chances of you actually delivering something that's spot on for what they're looking for is going to be way higher after that first conversation.
Totally. I spent the last 2.5 years focused on enterprise sales. And the joke with enterprise sales is success is getting your customer promoted, right? It's like doing something or delivering some massive amount of value that it makes their job easier and makes them look like an absolute hero and winner, that their boss is going to be like, dude, whatever you're doing, great job. Like here's a promotion. And if you can tie that back to your solution or whatever you're doing, that's a win for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best thing too. If you get somebody promoted or even if they get a different job at another brand and then they pull you over there, then you just like doubled your, your surface area in terms of partnership or increase your odds that things are going to work out, right?
Definitely. I love the comment around understanding your audience. I think that that's absolutely critical. At Insight Tracker, we had a period where we realized that our customer was a 40-plus-year-old and interested in XYZ. And so we were filtering social audiences based on demographics. And so it was storytelling to the right audience about the right conversation at the right time in their life, right? A 25-year-old athlete cares about things quite differently than a 40-year-old athlete and is willing to invest differently and is thinking about things differently. And so it was capturing the mind share at the right phase of life versus like a thing that can help you perform better. Well, if you're 25, you might not need as much assistance in performing better. You do, but you don't think that you do, kind of a thing. And so it's like meeting people where they are versus thinking that the solution, right? Because everybody could benefit from a $10,000 bike, $12,000 bike, but not everyone has the means to do it. And not everyone, like, it's not the best use of capital if you're, just learning basic bike skills, particularly if you're going to crash.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're going to crash, right? And also like it increases your own barrier to entry into the sport if that's what you think is what you
Right.
need to get started, right? Like, oh,
Totally.
now all of a sudden I need to spend how much to enjoy riding bikes? What,
Yeah.